Hi everyone, I'm Les,
And I'm Ashley.
and you're listening to Anthropotamus, where we explore some of your favorite anthropology topics.
Hi everyone, welcome to our latest episode of Anthropotamus. Today we're here with Dr. Nandar Yukyi, and we'll be discussing her poster, Lost Ancestors, Reintroducing and Reclaiming the Duckworth Burma Cranial Collection. Thank you, Nandar, for being on the show with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
So before we get into your poster, let's go ahead and tell our audience about yourself. How'd you get into anthropology, your background, and what led you into your research into Burma?
Hi everyone. As Ashley just said just now, my name is Nandar Yukyi, and I accidentally stumbled upon anthropology. So I grew up in Burma, where anthropology wasn't really well known, and a lot of Asian immigrant families, the only path was for you to become a medical doctor, not the other kind of doctor. I didn't even know what the path to a PhD was until I met my mentor in my undergrad, where I was just looking for any undergrad, an undergrad job working at a bio lab. I was a bio major, pre-med, and I stumbled upon this one cool professor named Tim White who had this profile picture on his faculty page where he has like two gunmen um, next to him when he was doing his field work in Ethiopia. And I was like, wow, this guy's cool. I'm gonna ask for a job from him, even if it's like a undergrad, And it turns out he was the author of the Human Osteology book, and he was like, well, you're gonna learn human osteology. So that's when I started to fall in love with the field of anthropology. It's because for me, osteology is kind of like you sit down and I just focus on this puzzle pieces. You just try to figure out who this person was that you're holding, and you get so much, I guess, like rewarding. It's like a rewarding experience out of it. So that's kind of how I fell into the field of biological anthropology, and it just went from there on, and I just went to uh, Texas State for my master's, and then I worked for the Defense POWMI accounting agency under SNA International for the 3 years between my master's and my PhD. And now I'm done with my PhD, so I'm working for them again, part-time, remote. So yeah, that's how I kind of stumbled upon anthropology and fell in love with the field.
And how did you end up starting your research in Burma?
So having been born and raised in Burma, I always felt this connection with my birth country. Even though I'm an American, I always think of myself as Burmese American. And so I've always wanted to go back and do some research because, fun fact, there are currently no Burmese born. Sorry, let me retrace that. Fun fact, currently there are no Burmese born biological anthropologists in the country right now, or anyone that knew about it really. So I think I'm currently the only or the first biological anthropologist from the Burmese diaspora. And so I feel this responsibility and kind of this excitement of, what I can do with my skill set and contribute back to Burma. And so in the beginning, before COVID hit, my goal was to go back and do some bioarchaeology work for a bunch of different sites in Burma. And it was always my dream, my goal to kind of go back and give back. But COVID hit, and the coup hit. So for those of you who don't know, there was a coup d'etat that took place during COVID, like in 2021 in Myanmar or Burma. And I just couldn't go back. And so I found this Burmese collection in Cambridge at the University of Cambridge called the Duckworth Collection. And it's just a bunch of different crania that uh, British called that the British collected when they were in Burma during the colonial times. So this was around a century ago, about 1910s, 1920s. That was when the collection happened. And I contacted the Duckworth laboratory staff, and I I got into touch with them and started working on this collection for my dissertation.
So you bring up how they collected the remains for this collection. Is in your introduction, you put, many resources were extracted, such as gems and wood, but you also add human remains. Is that what you're referring to in your introduction?
Yes. So in my poster that I did for the AABA, the American Association of Biological Anthropologists, I presented this poster earlier this year. Um, so I wanted to highlight what the British took from their colonized nation. In this instance, it's Burma, right? So right now I'm referring Burma as pre 1989. Um, the change, so you also see Burma as Myanmar, which is referred to as post 1989. Just a short explanation of the name change. Burma is actually referring to kind of like the nation that is only concentrated on the majority ethnic group, which is the Burmese, whereas Myanmar is more inclusive because there are 135 plus ethnic minorities, ethnic groups that make up um, the population of the country. So Myanmar uh, actually means um, sort of like an upcoming, like strong country. So it doesn't have any connotations that not connotations, but it doesn't have the root like Burmese ethnic group in there. So it's more inclusive. So because the change happened in 1989 um, by the military dictatorship, currently some countries, including the US, they don't recognize Myanmar as the official name. So I can use both as interchangeably. It's just letting you know what the difference between these two terms are. But back in British Burma, right? Like colonized Burma under British colonization, a lot of resources were taken, and Burma and Myanmar is known for their richness of gems, natural resources, and teak wood is one of our biggest. I guess we produce a lot of it in the country. Oil used to be one of them too. Um, and in addition, human remains were collected. And this is actually connected to kind of like the history of biological anthropology back in that that era, right? Like 1800s, early 1900s. They they meaning early biological anthropologists. They weren't even called physical anthropologists yet, but mostly biostatisticians like um, Carl, Pierce, Carl Pierce, and a bunch of these Western researchers. They were like, well, why don't we go around the world and collect as many different populations of human remains as possible? And so I guess this is how this collection came to be. Burmese remains were collected, and it's a collection of 142 individuals, but um, the remains were in varying shapes and preservation. So some of them were very fractured, and some of them are just very fragmented. Some of them are whole. But uh, the odd thing about this collection is that there's no mandibles associated. It's just crania. So crania is when you don't have the mandible. The skull is when you have the mandible included as well. But there's literally no mandibles that I could find associated to these remains. So it's all crania. If I say cranial collection, that's very true to its term. Um, which means that the rest of the postcranial and mandibles and the postcranial remains are either somewhere back in Myanmar, or they've been cremated. So another, I guess another thing that I want to say about this, kind of like the Burmese culture, and also kind of like a common occurrence in the country, is once the city starts expanding, they start moving cemeteries. So I think even though there's no documented um, procedures or anything about this collection back in like in the 1910s, or whenever they were collected, um, I I couldn't find any documentation, right? So this is what I'm making an educated guess from what I know about my culture and what I know about um, kind of like biological anthropology, the background of biological anthropology. So I think the British back in the day, they saw this movement of a cemetery, and they took this opportunity to kind of collect, kind of select um, the crania, like the portions that they want to study, and leave the rest to whatever the move was going on, and so somehow they ended up in a collection in the UK. Sorry, that was a really long,
That's
very,
okay.
very long explanation.
So that's rooted in it, do you think that might be rooted in the studies that were done to try and record cranial measurements back in like the beginning of biological anthropology or yeah,
Yeah,
anthropology then?
yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. So back then they wanted to study quote unquote racist,
Yeah.
which now has been debunked, so
Hmm.
it's kind of rooted in racist ideologies back in the
Hmm.
day.
Yeah.
So this just became one of the groups that they wanted to study because it's convenient that the British ruled Burma, and they can transport back whatever they wanted, be it gems, um, wood, or human remains.
So it just makes me wonder if any of the patterns that you see in your research, because I see on your poster here that it was mostly adults and mostly male, with some, female and some younger adolescents and sub-adults mixed in. I wonder if there
Mhm.
wasn't a selection bias by the researchers initially, just for specific types of skulls.
In my personal and kind of professional opinion, I don't think there was really like a selection that was going on. It's just whatever crania they could get
It's
from
just
that area. Yep. That being said, this is a pattern that we see a lot in a lot of skeletal collections. Males, adult males are overrepresented compared to adult females or subadults. Um, and it's a pattern that we see not just in this collection, right?
Mhm.
So, but I can try to make again like an educated guess because of the lack of documentation that is available.
Mhm.
Um, One possible reason for this trend that we're seeing is maybe they were working in again, this is 142 individuals out of how many in the cemetery, we don't know. And it could have just been that they were excavating, or they were collecting from an area where a lot of the male adults were buried.
Mhm.
And um, and me being Burmese, I know that in the Burmese culture, we're a bit more patriarchal. So they respect elder males a bit more, or just male adults in general. They have more of a higher place than other, I guess, other individuals. So maybe they were concentrated in an area where adult males were being buried, but also I guess like the inclusion of some females and some subadults. It might also mean it might also indicate socioeconomic status, right? So more of the individuals in that area, maybe they're better represented um, because they belong to a certain socioeconomic group.
Mhm.
But again, I'm just making these guesses based on what I know about my culture and what I know about anthropology, there's no documentations written
Right.
anywhere that I could find.
I
Okay.
also wonder if the reason there was less um, subadults is because they're not very well developed bones and fragmented or kind of
Yeah,
fall apart when you're digging them up.
Hmm.
exactly. Yeah. And some subadults that I came across in the collection, not all of the pieces were all together. So I had to kind of hold them together um, and do my data collection.
So, in your discussion, you bring up reintroducing the cranial collection back to the descendant community members or
Mhm.
a community member. Do you have any additional information on how that process is going?
Yeah, so um, another coincidence that happened was that I happened to be a descendant community member of this collection. It turns out that the out of it's kind of rare, but I saw that this collection was excavated, or the or origin of this collection was in my dad's hometown. So that's how I kind of found out about this connection between me and this collection. And um, currently, I don't really know how to trace back who the direct descendants are of this collection is because, again, as I repeated a lot of times in this interview, there's no written collection or written documentation anywhere that I could find in the museum. And I've worked with the lab manager who was super helpful, and she was she was just she was apologetic, and she said, no, I couldn't find anything else. So it's just like the nature of how things were done back in the day, which shows that I guess these were just lab specimens, not human beings, right? So that's kind of indicative of how these remains were treated in the beginning. But when I read that these collections, these individuals were from my dad's hometown, I felt this responsibility to kind of make the world know, at least the anthropological world first, know that this collection exists and it's been collecting dust in the back of a museum or back of a laboratory in a foreign country. And but um, when things are when things were done that way, like a century ago, we can make the most of it by kind of giving it the respect and attention that it deserves. Because for me, as a Burmese American biological anthropologist, this collection is really valuable because Burma or Myanmar is very underrepresented in a lot of places, including biological anthropology. So what I'm trying to do is kind of bring this collection to light and kind of put it on on um, the same level as other skeletal collections, like the famous ones, just other collections like Ham and Todd, and they get a lot more attention. But there are a lot of collections like this where people just forgot who these people were or where they came from, the country that they came from. So I'm taking this onus to kind of bring this collection and let people know, hey, we exist. This is where I'm gonna um, this is where I want to take this next level. I want to publish this at least this part of my dissertation as the first publication out of my dissertation. And I'm also planning to translate it into Burmese so that Burmese individuals can read it. And that's kind of like a longer process, but I need to get this published first in English, that is. But I guess the abstract can be translated into Burmese more easily. But my goal is for my research and this kind of the knowledge of this collection existing um, kind of known to more people. So with that, hopefully we can kind of trace down more direct descendants. And if I'm lucky, maybe one person will be like, "Oh yeah, I remember, my great great grandfather or whatever. They were buried in this town over here, and." oral history are just as important, right? So I want to talk to locals over there and find out who these people were, and at the very least, I can kind of know that there are direct descendants from these individuals. And of course, if I can get DNA, you know, analysis done on these individuals, then great. But of course, that takes time and resources, a lot of money that has to go in there. So it's only the beginning right now, and this is just I'm just getting started for Burmese related biological anthropology. I have a lot of hope and excitement for this, but I'm hoping that this is a start. And the other part of this whole process is, repatriation. Everyone asks me, a lot of people ask me about the repatriation process of this collection. I am in conversation with the lab manager, who's also very supportive of how I would like what type of resolution I would like to see as a descendant community member, and also an anthropologist that worked on this collection. Currently, Myanmar is in no position right now with the civil war that's going on to retake these remains. So for now, I think it's ironic to say it's safer in the country of the colonizers, but I'm hopeful at least that one day I can bring them home, at least back to the home country, and it will help educate a lot of future Burmese biological anthropologists also, if I can't track down, the direct descendants, or um, I I have this big responsibility that I'll have to figure out later. Um, but that will involve a lot of conversation with community members in that town and see what they want with the remains, what they want to do. Culturally, Burmese people don't really think much about human remains. Um, there are some like spiritual, I guess, beliefs that are associated with it, but otherwise, um, kind of it being like a Buddhist country, a majority Buddhist country, they either cremate the remains, or um, they I guess they don't really have too strong of an opinion collectively. But again, of course, I'm not talking for everyone in the country, right? As it's not a homogeneous um, population, so it's important to kind of talk to as many people as I can to make sure that it's properly treated.
I was just thinking, what if you just made your dad take a Ancestry.com DNA test? Your dad spit in this tube for me.
I talked to my dad about this actually. He was like, I don't think these people are descendants, because I think my family moved around in that area a little bit too, and this was a little bit before my family's establishment in that town, but they were in that region around that time. So my dad was like, I don't think we're related, and I was like, but I mean, we're from the same
Mhm.
region, so. This is like the closest I can find right now. The closest ascendant community member is me and my dad. I guess my dad and my and his family, his side of the family. So, yeah, maybe we can do kind of like a DNA test, ancestry.com kind of thing, and see where that takes us.
It's a pretty huge coincidence. Uh,
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
it's a
It
small,
is.
not like a huge country, so
Well,
No, yeah, it's a size of Texas. Myanmar is the size of Texas, which isn't too big, like in
I mean,
comparison to a lot of other
yeah.
countries. But it is, I think it is the largest um, Southeast Asian country on the mainland. That's not like island Southeast Asia. It's like in the mainland. That's the biggest country. But um, it's so Molamyang used to be there's this town that's the remains came from. It used to be the capital at some point. So Myanmar has a very long history of changing capitals.
Mhm.
It happened most recently in 2005, I think 2005, 2006, mid 2000s. Um, my hometown is the biggest city in Myanmar, and it used to be the capital, but then the capital changed to Naypyidaw somewhere along the way in the 2000s. But it's interesting because my dad's hometown is in southern Myanmar, where this collection came from. There's also another collection, I think, in the either in the National History Museum in the UK, I think in London. There's another group of remains that came from Mandalay, which is where the earthquake happened most recently. The really big 7.7 earthquake hit. It's in the middle of the country, and that's where my mom came from. So it just happened to be two major cities in the country, and it's uh, and my parents just happened to be from each of them from both. And so I wouldn't be surprised if I found more remains from Myanmar from Yangon at some point, which is where I'm from, which is my birth city. So it's it's very interesting to see how these geographic differences in like show up in these collections.
So, question not related to the poster. You brought up like couple times, like you took the initiative to go out and speak with White, and there was another instance you brought up, and I don't remember. But for
Okay.
those who are starting their career in anthropology and research, what advice do you have to them when they're going out and seeking mentors and peers to work with?
So for me, as someone who got really lucky with finding a mentor that really supports me, um, I went from not knowing entirely what anthropology is and what it entails to having my PhD, and now kind of on my path to become, I guess, like a practicing forensic anthropologist or just a biological anthropologist in general. I would try to say, go with your gut on what um, go with your gut on who you want your mentor to be, because it's not just Dr. White also that mentored me right in this field. He was the beginning. He was the first ever mentor that I had in anthropology, and I just got really lucky just finding him. And I don't want to just say just depend on your luck, but there have been other instances as well where I've had to choose between different mentors, and I went with my gut. And for my PhD, I went with Dr. Marin Palud, who was very kind, and she told me that even if I didn't end up choosing her program, that she would be willing to support me. So find mentors that would do that for you, and find someone you, like the kids are saying it, find someone you vibe well with. So I had happened to vibe well with Marin, who is also Ashley's advisor. Um, I I would say trust your gut. Um, Look up their interests and kind of talk to as many people as you can when you're looking for mentors. Talk to have coffee with them, have like a Zoom session with them, and from just one conversation, with just one sitting, you can kind of find out a lot about one person and see if you would be able to get along with this mentor. That's the first thing, because when you're applying for programs, like a position in, like a grad program, you're not just they're not just interviewing you, you're also interviewing them to see if they're a good fit for you. And so as someone who's starting out in the field, I would my big I guess like this is a very cliche thing to say, but go with your gut on if a mentor gives you kind of like a bad feeling about yourself, then maybe try to look for a different one or a different program. um, I'm sure there's something out there for everyone. So I just happened to be very lucky in finding those people that were supportive. um, and I think having a good like a really good match with your mentor is the most important thing in succeeding in any setting, and not just grad program, but also like in the future when you're in the workforce. that's also very important.
All right. Thank you, Nandar, again for being on the show with us. Thank you, Nandar, again for being on the show with us.
Thank you for having me.
And for our listeners, you can find us on YouTube, Audible, Castbox,
All
Apple
those other places.
Podcasts. We're everywhere. We're everywhere.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening. Until next time. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you all for listening. Distribution of Anthropotamus is in collaboration with the American Anthropological Association. Please continue to follow us on Instagram and Twitter @Anthropotamus for our latest episodes, show notes, and book discussion schedule.